The new IDK album ponders on the existence of deities and IDK is a rapper originally born in London but hails from PG County, Maryland. Another Maryland artist repping that area like Rico Nasty, like Logic. My favorite project of his would probably have to be I Was Very Bad. It showcased a lot of his versatility, a lot of his skill as a rapper. He's teased this album to be the Section 80 before his Good Kid Mad City, and I don't hold too much against him. You know, I wasn't a huge fan of Section 80 either. So it's no surprise to me after listening to Is He Real, I am still waiting for his next project that is going to be his Good Kid Mad City. This album deals with the confusion of the loss of innocence almost as if it's a betrayal to humanity. And it all pretty much stems from, in my opinion, the revelations that we get near the closing portion of this album where he admits that his stepfather is the one that transmitted AIDS to his mother. The intro track kind of starts off with this very open-minded, non-narrow view of what heaven might be like for a kid's perspective. This immediately transitions into this nightmarish, warped kind of vocal effect that leads you to believe that the child's mentality has been immediately warped and is now jaded based off of some trauma that you could probably interpret. And if anything, I can get from the intro track that IDK is more the child that has this perspective or this view of the world than anything else, because of the revelation, like I said, that we get at the end of the album. It's more of an album that questions the faith due to something terrible happening in your life that you feel like wasn't supposed to happen. You didn't ask for this, the person that it happened to didn't ask for this, and they probably didn't deserve it. And you trying to find some sort of solace or comfort with what happened, you need something to question, like, why did this happen? It's reasonable for someone who just lost their parent to ask, is God real? Or to immediately claim that God isn't real. You're dealing with heartbreak, trauma, anxiety, stress, PTSD most likely. These are all things that just hit you all at once. Especially given on the track 4200 Choices, he's talking about how his mother wanted to put him in church. How is it that God allowed something so terrible happen to a God-fearing woman? Like, it wouldn't make any sense, right? As we traverse through the remainder of the album, it's almost kind of this defiance or rebellion against God in a way. Now, to me, this is illustrated on tracks like 24, where he raps over these really hard, rough piano keys that's almost reminiscent of Kendrick's Humble in a way. I like it. It demands all your attention, has a huge presence, but in my opinion, a lot of what he's talking about on this track when it comes to issues with money are just things that humanity isn't prepared for. It's almost like this loss of innocence that he describes in a lot of the ways on this project are due to this lack of preparation if there is a God. After we acknowledge what's happened to him and the trauma that he went through, it's kind of like he follows the rest of the album ignorant to a deity's existence in the first place, ignoring the question if there is a God or not and seeming to live his life regardless. Lilly is another trap banger on this project that details the pitfalls of a life of fame. Porno has got to be my favorite track on this project though, because of this Pusha T feature that we get laced into the track, the Jid feature near the end, this woman as an interlude or a bridge to the next hook that's getting blasted. Her back is getting blasted out. I love that. Mixing on this track is so pristine and fantastic. We have these really grungy 808s that appear after the first portion of the song where he essentially raps about being a sex addict.
Is the devil like 666 bells? Is the devil like 666?
The flow of the Michael track definitely gives me some I bust the windows out your car, and it's also probably the most Kanye-esque track on this project. We have almost like these alarm-like effects, these moments in the track where there's extremely fast hi-hats and this like triple time 808 that kind of gives the track a lot of momentum, like he's having a mental rush at the thought of his stepfather doing what he did to his mother. And it seems the want for something to happen to his stepfather, or the want for himself to do something to his stepfather, is kind of halted by this moral compass, or the idea of there being a deity in the back of his mind preventing him from taking that action, knowing that it's something that he shouldn't do, possibly feeling whether or not that might be a conscience or a higher power telling him not to. This is also a discussion that he goes into with Tyler the Creator, who is a known atheist. I also like how DMX makes an appearance as a pastor that's somewhat giving him a baptism in the intro of the album. Happens right after the 4200 Choices track where he says, I'm drowning, and then we see him, or we can picture him being baptized by DMX himself. And I think DMX is the perfect person or the perfect fit for that. I think he'd probably be one of the more fitting people to get that spiritual advice from. And I also really like how the ending lettering for each of these tracks spells out "you see for yourself," which to me can kind of be interpreted as him saying that if you don't want to listen to my interpretation of what I feel it is or isn't, you can find out for yourself with your own relationships and your own experience. All that being said, my biggest issue with this project remains the fact that it is larger than IDK himself. And at moments it bogs down the listening experience, it bogs down the project, because we're listening to a topic that has been tackled more times than Tony Roma. Regardless of how many times this subject has been tackled, I haven't gotten any more nuance or any more insight into the situation more than just a question that doesn't get answered by the end of the album. And that's okay. I'm not looking for rappers to be philosophers, but that's essentially what he kind of tries to do on this project, and it just falls short. He's swimming in the shallowest of waters when he's talking about a lot of these subjects, and knowing that a lot of these subjects have a spiritual foundation just bog it down to me. I feel like I would like them way more if they were just tracks about him, as opposed to tracks asking a question about something so large and grand. There are moments on this project where I feel like I might be listening to a Jaden Smith record. And I'm not saying that because IDK is some weak rapper, he's definitely not, but I feel like the overall concept of this record overtakes the talent that he has. I'm so much more focused on whether or not he's answering these questions appropriately because of the responsibility that he's put on himself to answer the question in the first place. You're not gonna have an answer for me. This task that he's given himself to answer a question that's been based in some sort of tragedy, I feel like is unintentionally pretentious. I would much rather him have formed this entire album around the trauma and the heartbreak that he went through in the revelation of his mother's death, because that to me is the most heartfelt and the most authentic that we get from IDK on this project. I rarely do this in reviews, bringing up something completely unrelated to try to tie the context into the actual point of what I'm saying, but I saw this interview with Joe Rogan and Neil deGrasse Tyson not long ago, and Joe was pondering over the whys of gravity. Why does gravity exist, or what its purpose might be? And Neil deGrasse Tyson's point in the conversation was that it doesn't really matter why if I can understand how it works. If I can figure out what it does and how it works, then the why doesn't matter as much. And I feel that should be the approach for this album. It shouldn't matter why. If you've decided to believe in it, you've accepted the lack of the why. You might never figure out why. So for this album, I don't really feel the question should be, is he real? Especially when you tell the listener you see for yourself based off the lettering of the end of each track name on this album. I feel it should be not, is he real, but if you've decided to believe, we're assuming that your religion is going to tell you how it works without necessarily explaining a why you are here or a why it happened in the first place. And I feel that's something you either have to be comfortable with or not, and that comfortability is going to make you believe or not. I think IDK is a really talented rapper, but I think the size of this concept completely stretches out the album to an extent that it's almost uncomfortable. Sure, it's a big question that he's asked himself, but it's not something that I expect him to be able to tackle or deliver some kind of nuanced commentary on in 36 minutes. And I don't think people should expect that of him, and I don't think he should expect that of himself. The tracks on here that are the best are the ones that can be listened to outside the context of the project, which are tracks like Porno, tracks like 24, tracks like Michael What the These are tracks that not only can contextually fit the type of person that he is, but to me fit better when geared toward him. The tracks that are more personal here, I feel like, are less bogged down in this whole God concept. So while there are some really great songs in this project, some songs that I'm definitely going to take with me, I think the entirety of the project in itself is bogged down by the album concept, and it makes the album itself weaker as opposed to if the songs were just released by themselves. I would much rather get an album about him detailing the trauma and the stress of losing his mother than asking the question of whether or not God is real. IDK with Is He Real? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. You let me know how you felt about this in the comment section down below. And yeah, I'll see you next time. I'm waiting for that Good Kid, Mad City though.